The beginning of my charity career started right before Canada. I met Sally Struthers in San Francisco. We were doing a gig at the same place where she was just leaving. She used to do commercials for Save the Children. And I got involved in charity from, her inspiration, really. When I moved to Canada, while I was there, we did concerts. I started doing concerts for Save the Children. When I came back to LA, I started Musicians for UNICEF. And I had over 300 musicians involved in Musicians for UNICEF. In the early 90s, I had a failed relationship, which kind of moved me to want to move away again. And Nashville was calling. I moved there, I think, in 94. For 94 and 95, I was here for a couple of years. I knew a lot of people and went back to work at the drum store where I had been working for a while. I liked it there. The place wasn't as clean as I liked it. So the first day I went there was a young guy working with me. I went and scrubbed the bathroom, and I was in there scrubbing away, and I got over to the toilet bowl. They hadn't really taken care of it. And I'm scrubbing and cleaning, and this kid came over. He says, "I don't understand, Eddie." I said, "You don't understand what?" He said, "Well, yesterday and for the rest of your whole life," he said, "I know all the work you've done, and you were just working for Engelbert Humperdinck, making thousands of dollars, and today you're scrubbing the toilet." I said, "Come over here." And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Come over here closer to the toilet." He said, "Okay." He walked over to the toilet. He said, "What?" I said, "That's a great job I just did. It's beautiful. It's very clean, isn't it?" He said, "So it's clean." I said, "Yeah, it's a job I did. I wanted to do it. It was a job well done, and you just complimented me for it." And he just scratched his head. He said, "I don't understand it." And he walked out of the room, but Jimmy and I had scrubbed enough toilets in Nashville. We both wanted to go back to California. Towed my car and all the stuff I owned and came back to California. I lived right at the beach in Carpinteria, a beautiful little beach in Carpinteria. I went body surfing every single day across the street from my apartment. This day was a Saturday, wasn't any different than any other day. And Carpinteria boasts the safest beach in the world. And normally it is. So I was out there that day, and on Saturday I had a gig that night at a pizza joint. And then we were going to Colorado a few days later. And I remember I was taking the last wave in from the ocean. I was going to take that wave in and then get ready for my gig and go to work. So I jumped into the wave. I was about 20 yards out, all by myself. It was a seemingly angry wave. It didn't flow or turn. It just went, I heard a big crack and then nothing. And then I was 3 feet underwater, totally paralyzed, nobody there. I was all alone. And I felt my body floating in this one direction and my spirit floating in another entirely. And it was floating towards this beautiful energy, I don't know how to describe it except this unconditional love. It was warm and enticing. It was like being in God's hot tub. And as my body was floating in this direction and my spirit in the other, I thought, I need to discard the body so I can continue on this amazing, beautiful, enticing journey. I thought, well, I'll have to open my mouth and let the water in so I can drown. I can get rid of the body, and then I can continue. My body meant nothing to me at that moment. The spirit and where I was going and how enticing that was meant everything. So I opened my mouth to let the water in. When I opened my mouth, I was lifted from the bottom and placed gently at the shore 20 yards away. The lifeguard with the most seniority on the Central Coast ran over. He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Nope, I'm totally paralyzed." And he put surfboards up around me so the waves wouldn't come over my face. He didn't let anyone touch me. Called the paramedics. We went into the hospital. The best neurosurgeon on the Central Coast happened to be there on a Saturday. He took me into to have an MRI done. As he spoke to me, and he said, your neck is broken. The sixth vertebra is totally herniated and pressing against your spinal cord. I was paralyzed from the neck down." He said, "That's what's happening." I said, "Well, what do we do about that?" He said, "Well, I have to do an operation." I said, "In a week? What?" He said, "No, right now." I said, "All right, do what you have to do." I was there for a week or 10 days in the ICU. I forget. And then they shipped me to the rehab in Santa Barbara, which was a beautiful building on top of a mountain overlooking the ocean. I knew that I was going to be all right. And they kept saying, "You're going to have to deal with this, Eddie." They were sending psychiatrists in. The main psychiatrist came in and she said, "Eddie, you need to start understanding what your options are and what life will be like and in a wheelchair, and I want to help you." I said, "You know, all of you are so kind, but you're all wrong. I'm going to be fine. I'll walk out of here." And she kind of shook her head. She said, "Okay, dear," and she walked away. There was no indication that I would get better. And every day we would sit, I'd be in my wheelchair, and every day she had like a micrometer and she would check to see how far I could move my foot. And it wasn't moving. Finally, after a couple of weeks of that, and I figured I was ready to try at least, there was a parallel bar near where we were working. I said, "Vika, put that stuff away." I said, "Push me over to the parallel bars. You go to the other end of the parallel bars. I'm going to walk down and meet you." And I could see it in her face, like, "Okay, let's get this over with. Let him fall down if that's what it takes so that we can all do our job." So she did that. She rolled me over. I stood up. I was standing up on the parallel bars. She went down the other end. I didn't know if I could walk. I was like, "Okay, this is it." And I took 2 steps on my own. I was like elated. I can't believe that happened. And she looked at me and her eyes were puffing up, and then my eyes were puffing up, and we started bawling. And she ran over and hugged me. And "Oh my God," she said, "you were right." I said, "I told you." I started fooling around with percussion items in the hospital. The first thing to come back for me was my right hand. So I asked a friend to bring me some drumsticks, a cowbell. By the way, don't ever bring a cowbell to the hospital. But we had shakers and sticks, and there's a railing on the side of my bed, and I started playing. And yeah, I still got it. I'm only a hand at the time, but I had the groove. So I asked the attendant in the room, Carlos is there. I said, "Carlos, can you just do on my food tray?" He said, "I think so," and he did. So I was doing, and it was in the pocket. It was cool. It sounded great. So this little old lady rolled in from the other ward, Edith. She was in her late 70s. She had spinal cord surgery. She was always in pain. We felt so sorry for her. And she said, "Eddie, I want to play." I said, "Okay." We gave her the cowbell. I said, "Can you just play on the hands, 1 and 2?" So we'd have, she couldn't get it. So the guy next to me, Ted, long story short, he was in a motorcycle accident, broke every bone in his body. He would ask people every day, get me out of bed and just throw me on the floor so I can crawl around. I have to move, you know. And he cracked us up, but he was serious about it. So he goes, Eddie, I can play that part, the cowbell part. I said, all right. Well, I told the attendant, put the cowbell on his chest and let him play one hand to it. So he did. And he only had one hand too, and he played the part perfectly. Dun, 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 bop, bop. So Edith said, but Eddie, I still want to play. I said, okay, Edith, just go 1, 2, 3, 4. It was an ensemble, everybody playing their parts and playing it perfectly. And I thought, oh, they're going to throw us out. We're making so much noise. The nurses started dancing. Doctors were looking in because we kept it up. And there was the beginning of the Rhythmic Arts Project. I stayed at the Institute and volunteered for 3 years, but we used it to address rehab goals, balance, energy, focus, and attention, range of motion. These are all things that most of us were dealing with as patients at the rehab. We were gearing the exercises to enhance those happenstance. What happened was Libby and I did so well with it, we started showing it to conferences. The first one we went to was in Northern California. And after we were done, a young lady from Pasadena who was a recreational therapist said, have you ever worked in the field of developmental disabilities? And I said, no, I'm not familiar. I've never been around folks. So she said, would you come to Pasadena and work with our children? We have about 20, they had almost 30 children. I said, yeah, of course, I'll come. I took a drum and I went down there. We went to Susie's class first, where the 5-year-olds were. There were kids like in a circle. And she had an egg shaker. I brought some things. She took the egg shaker and said, put the egg shaker on the ground, put your hands on your lap. Everybody who could did that. And she said, pick the egg shaker up, shake it over your head, put the egg shaker back on the ground, put your hands back in your lap. Some kids didn't know what their lap was. They didn't know down from up or under, over, through all these prepositional concepts were new to them. And a light went on. I went, okay, I get it. That's what this is about. This is where I'm supposed to be. I saw a path to a real education that was lacking in that field. Reading, writing, arithmetic, social skills, creative thinking, critical thinking, sign language. The Rhythmic Arts Project today has come so far. Recently, I got involved with the University of Southern California, Santa Barbara. And I met the director of early childhood development there and a few other therapists who are working in basically correcting trauma in children from 1 to 5, early childhood development. I had done a presentation there, and they kind of wrote the beginning of this method and included the Rhythmic Arts Project as a way into that remedy, so to speak, of early childhood trauma. So this is brand new for us. It's called the Harmony Project. Very excited about it. And, the therapists are as well. And it just keeps growing. The whole program is simple. When we're identifying colors, we start with blue, green, red, and black. So when we added signs, it was blue. What color is it? It's blue. What's the sign for blue? Right? And black is the sign for black. And red, sign for red. And green, the sign for green. The program became visual, tactile, auditory, combined with speech, a multifaceted that helps us not only to learn, but to retain the lessons. The basis of the methodology is a quarter note. When we were learning how to count to 4, when you and I were learning, our teacher wrote 1, 2, 3, 4 on the blackboard. But our folks don't necessarily grasp conventional scholastics as easily. The drum is the voice of the methodology. So this began with counting very simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We wanted to differentiate colors. We have 4 drums in 4 different colors. And red, blue, black, and green. And they would hit the drum and read the notes. Now the notes in the book are not black quarter notes. They're red quarter notes, blue, green, and black. And that same method is throughout the whole book with probably 100 different exercises. When I first started the program 26 years ago, I had a deal with a company who made really great instruments, but they were wood congas. They were tall. They were very heavy. I couldn't move them an inch myself because of my disability, but nobody that I worked with would be able to either. It would be even more difficult for most of them. I did that for a couple of years. It didn't work out. And the people in that company were more concerned with how many drums I could sell. So I had to leave them. And I was at a NAMM show one year, almost every year. And I ran into a friend of mine from the Pearl Corporation, Takasomi. And he asked me how I was doing. And I said, I'm doing great. I said, but I have this problem with instruments. And he said, well, why don't you let us take care of that? And he invited me to Nashville. I came here. And they showed me what they call a fun drum, which was absolutely perfect. It was really lightweight. Even in my condition, I could lift that drum over my head. It sounded great right out of the box. You didn't have to tune it. It was pre-tuned. It was fiberglass. It was bright yellow or red. There's various colors. It just became the instrument, the voice of the trap program. People often ask me, well, it's a drum program. I said, no, it's a learning program. The drum is at the center of it. This choice to use this particular drum all these years has been a blessing for us. Hundreds of musicians have come to play for us every year, sometimes twice a year. We do benefit concerts, and the benefit concerts make it possible for me to get all around the world and to help people in as far away places as, Damascus and Turkey and Jordan and Thailand and places like that. It means the world to me. It means the world to everybody who's ever had anything to do with this program. So thank you, Pearl. And thank you for all these years